Journo's back here at the Newcastle United training ground where myself and Jordan have been speaking to Eddie Howe ahead of Newcastle United's home match against Bournemouth at St James's Park tomorrow afternoon. Been a very newsy week for Newcastle United. Obviously, Dan Ashworth speculation, Newcastle sporting director, linked quite heavily with a move to Manchester United under new minority ownership. And obviously on the injury front, Newcastle don't have a fit striker heading into the weekend. Callum Wilson, chest injury, pectoral muscle surgery has been confirmed, and it's not looking too good on the striker front, Jordan, or the injury front really, because it just never seems to stop this season.
Yeah, the Callum Wilson fears were confirmed by Eddie Howe. Didn't give a timescale, did say that he hoped the player could play a part later on the season, but it does sound like, as reported by our colleague, Craig Hope, 9 to 12 weeks for Callum Wilson, which a lot of people have said about his injury record. Me personally, I think on this occasion, I don't see how he avoids it. People are criticising for getting a tussle with defender in the 92nd minute of the game, but how many times has Callum Wilson done that in his career and hasn't came out with a pectoral injury which has required surgery? So I do feel for Callum Wilson, in that sense, it probably sums up Newcastle United's fortune on the injury front this season. You think about all the strange and freak injuries.
How many freak injuries can you have before they stop being freak injuries?
Yeah, well, exactly that. You think about the two dislocated shoulders for Jacob Murphy, Nick Pope. I think the Callum Wilson one, I think I tweeted yesterday, is probably the freakiest one that I've seen. The freakiest, it's a good word, that one. It's probably the freakiest one I've seen this season. Just the way it came about. As I say, he's literally in a tussle with the defender, and finds himself out, pretty much out for the season. I think if he does return, it would be later April, start of May, where I think Callum Wilson could return. But that leaves Newcastle with just one fully fit striker for, as I say there, the majority of the season, and Alexander Isak.
And there's an asterisk over that really, because you say fully fit, how long will he stay fully fit?
That's a problem.
He's not currently fully fit at the moment. Eddie Howe said he probably won't play against Bournemouth this weekend, but then went on to say he's looking very, very good. Very good. He's training, he's been brilliant, and we'll wait and see. So he's almost had a U-turn on Alexander Isak's availability just within a sentence of speaking. So we'll wait and see regarding Alexander Isak. Eddie Howe said probably not, but an Eddie Howe injury update, when he says something like that, he could make the bench. You never know. So on the injuries, Jacob Murphy obviously hasn't trained, but then he also stressed he hasn't trained yet. Listen to what I'm saying, because obviously last week he said the same about Anthony Gordon, and then he goes and starts at Nottingham Forest, despite the majority of people, I know you didn't, Jordan.
I didn't,
The majority of people, Sky Sports being one of them, who he answered, who asked the question about Jacob Murphy, saying he was ruled out for the Nottingham Forest game. So, that sort of brushes over the injury stuff. I asked
Joe Willock.
Well, Joe Willock's close, Elliot Anderson's close.
They're all close.
Matt Targett's close, but how long have those players been close for? But on the Callum Wilson situation, I tried to draw comparisons with Joe Linton's injury, where he picked up an injury back end of the season. He's expected to be back. Eddie Howe said it's a possibility Joe Linton played his last game for the club because of the nature of his injury and the fact he's only got 18 months left on his contract. Callum Wilson also has that length left on his contract. Injury towards the back end of the season. I said, is that a possibility? And Eddie Howe shut it down completely, said they're completely different situations. Well, I'd probably disagree and say they're similar.
Yeah, they are. Both 18 months left on the contracts.
And similar length injuries, but he stressed that Callum Wilson's was purely an injury situation, whereas Joe Linton's was a contract situation, although Joe Linton's also out injured. So make of that what you will.
Poor boy, Eddie. Poor.
But I'm on the transfer front even. Jordan, you asked I've dropped you in it there. But on the back of Callum Wilson injury, we shouldn't laugh actually, it's ridiculous. Callum Wilson injury, Alexander Isak being the only potentially fit striker. You asked a good question after.
Good question. I was embarrassed to ask it, but I thought I debated among the fellow press guys before the start of the press conference, said it was a valid question. So I asked Eddie Howe if Newcastle would consider signing a free agent, given that they've got 2 places free in their 25-man squad, and his response was, have you got a list? So no, I don't, Eddie.
Suggest he's open to it.
Yeah, I should have followed up saying, well, if I did, would you be open? But
Dwight Gale recently released.
Dwight Gale, former striker, Lys Muzier.
Bournemouth, he likes his Bournemouth.
Yeah. Stefano Okaka yesterday, the former Watford striker. Just credit to Transfer Mark for all my research here, but yeah, I suppose it'd all be good.
It's
fine and well.
scraping the barrel. It's not gonna.
Fine and well signing a free agent striker, but is there really any options out there? Which what Eddie Howe was sort of suggesting when he in response to my question. So I'm guessing they're not going to go and sign a free agent striker purely because of the lack. They could, but there's a lack of quality out there. So all our striker options, you've obviously got Isak, who probably will pick up another groin injury before the end of the season. Let's be honest. So his minutes now, we've been saying it for months, needs to be managed. He cannot be playing. I know Newcastle's schedule isn't 3 games a week now, but there will be times where they'll have to play 3 games a week, and he can't do that. So Eddie Howe needs to call upon other players. Anthony Gordon is the backup striker, but then beyond that,
where do you look? Jacob Murphy up front, aren't we, at some point?
Yes, it does. Well, I remember early in the season, someone asked Eddie, it might be me actually, who is your backup striker options? And he named Jacob Murphy in the category, which I was a bit surprised by. So yeah, you've got Isak, who hopefully Eddie Howe will be wrapping in bubble wrap. Is it bubble wrap? Cotton wool, that's the one. Sorry, bad terminology there.
Same.
Yeah, and then below that you've got Anthony Gordon and Jacob Murphy. So yeah, two wingers as backup strikers doesn't bode well. But yeah, it's honestly they've got to manage Isak's injury. They cannot have him breaking down again and having him out for, was it 2 weeks he's been out for now? Yeah. They can't keep managing that, especially now they haven't got Callum Wilson to call upon. So a very delicate situation going into the latter stages of the season, and it needs to be managed. Otherwise, Newcastle are going to suffer massively as a consequence.
Yeah, definitely. And moving on from injuries, a big talking point in the press conference, as I touched on at the start of the video, was Dan Ashworth, who's been linked to.
Your voice has gone there,
I know, it's happening. Big talking point from the press conference this week was obviously Dan Ashworth. Build up to it, he'd been heavily linked with Manchester United. Hasn't been shut down. Reports he's even said yes to Manchester United, although that hasn't been translated or communicated behind the scenes at Newcastle, according to Eddie Howe at least. But Eddie Howe was asked many questions about Dan Ashworth and the situation, and the overriding message was quite clear that Eddie Howe wants this situation resolved as soon as possible. He wouldn't shut it down, as there's obviously something in it, but he wants it resolved as soon as possible, John.
Yeah, he was asked if Dan Ashworth had committed his future at Newcastle this week until he wanted to stay, and he said no. So I think it's quite obvious that Dan Ashworth wants to take up the position at Manchester United. It's now, say, between the two clubs over compensation fees, etc. Which, yeah, it's a messy situation. It's a situation that I don't think anyone could have foreseen, although the links to Manchester United have been there since December. But it comes at a bad time because a lot of people can debate about what Dan Ashworth's done for the football club. He's done a lot behind the scenes in terms of academy restructure, scouting networks, etc. But people might say he's not that big of a miss, but 20 months in, he's put all these plans in place, and he's not going to be the man that oversees them, and that's a really tough situation for Newcastle. They're going to have to go out and find someone that can either carry on those plans or have to find someone that's going to do something completely different. You employ a sporting director like they did with Dan Ashworth 20 months ago, and you expect him to be here for the next 5 to 10 years, and they're not going to have that because, look, nothing's confirmed yet, as Eddie Howe stressed. That I think he even said that Man United haven't approached Newcastle yet, but by the sounds of it, and Eddie Howe alluded upon, there's lots of reports, it's going to come at some point, and it does feel like Dan Ashworth wants to go. And for me, I think it is a big blow for Newcastle. It leaves them in a very dangerous situation. Eddie Howe spoke about the intelligence side of Dan Ashworth switching from Newcastle to Manchester United. Dan Ashworth knows Newcastle United's contracts in and out. He knows Newcastle United's summer transfer targets. Let's be honest.
Bruno's buyout clause.
Exactly. So that's Man United at this moment in time, or a direct rival to Newcastle United. So it is a big blow in many ways. Than one, I understand when people look at the signs Newcastle made on Dan Ashworth, it might be a little bit underwhelmed, but there's so much more you've got to consider behind the scenes, and I think the imminent departure of Dan Ashworth is a very damaging thing for this football club.
Yeah, and as you alluded to, Jordan, Eddie Howe stressed as well, and Dan Ashworth stressed previously, the sporting director role is not a short-term role. So the fact that Dan Ashworth, in all possibility, has been at Newcastle for less than 2 years and has, as you say, all this information about Newcastle's contracts, academy, recruitment. Eddie Howe said plans of, obviously, the plan a window ahead, Newcastle, potentially 2 windows ahead. Plans for the summer will already be in place. Targets will have been identified, as much as they're not disclosed publicly or in the media in most cases. Dan Ashworth will have a clear plan, a clear strategy in place, and know Newcastle inside and out, more than almost any person, more so than Eddie Howe, you'd probably argue as well, because he has that connection with the academy and set up and things like that. So for him to jump ship is ultimately what it is. It sounds harsh, but jump ship to a direct rival. Manchester United 1 place above Newcastle in the Premier League table, finished 1 place above Newcastle last season. With all that intelligence, as Eddie Howe put it, is potentially damaging, and that's why Newcastle will hold out for as big a fee as possible. And if they can get a decent fee, there's a chance that it almost removes the need for Newcastle to sell some big players in the summer, potentially. So
FFP boost, who would have thought it?
Exactly. So there is potential logic to it, but how damaging would it be to have Dan Ashworth at a rival club in time for the summer? Whether that happens or not, there's obviously gardening leave and things like that, and compensation fees that would have to be agreed, and Newcastle will obviously hold out for as much as possible, because Man U in the past with Newcastle have been very tough negotiators. You go back to that Jesse Lingard loan situation, Newcastle won't be willing to do Manchester United any favours. So the ball's in Newcastle's court really, but if you've got a sporting director, key figure at the club who wants to go, it's ultimately going to be a difficult situation for Newcastle to manage, but one they could potentially benefit from, certainly financially, further down the line.
Yeah, rinse Manchester United for everything that they've got, take them very bit of compensation, and get them back for that Jesse Lingard January, because say the terms are
which was a bullet dodge.
It was a bullet dodge, but at the time Manchester United showed their true colours, saying they want to do Newcastle no favours when they were battling to stay in the Premier League. So why can't Newcastle play hardball as well?
Rivals as well.
Exactly. So the ball is in Newcastle's court, and hopefully, as I say, the term there, rinse Manchester United for everything that they've got if they really do want Dan Ashworth. Any more points? Talking points?
I think that was pretty much it, really. I mean, injuries in Dan Ashworth were the two big ones. Obviously, Eddie Howe against Bournemouth once again, still yet to beat Bournemouth in the Premier League as Newcastle manager. He went back on the reverse fixture at the Vitality Stadium back in November, where, to be honest, if I'm looking back, as bad as Newcastle's run of form was over the festive period, I think if there's one team that have played Newcastle off the park this season, that Bournemouth team at the Vitality Stadium, albeit Newcastle were very depleted at the time, didn't have Bruno. Ben Parkinson got on the pitch. Louis Miley made his first Premier League start as well.
Kieran Trippier kicked off with a fan.
Yes. I think Bournemouth outplayed Newcastle as much or more than any other team we've seen this season, with the maybe exception of Liverpool on New Year's Day. So Bournemouth, very capable side, have proven difficult. They've always been tight games at St James's Park with Eddie Howe as manager of Newcastle, and obviously down at the Vitality Stadium last season was a close game as well, where Newcastle were probably fortunate to come away with a point. So Eddie Howe was asked about Dominic Solanke as well, a signing he made, and was almost could be categorised as a flop initially, but now is one of the most deadly strikers in the Premier League. So I think Eddie Howe will be feeling quite pleased with himself after that. He spoke very highly of Dominic Solanke, as he always does, but hopes he doesn't have a good game this weekend.
Yeah, he was asked about links to Bournemouth players, and he said that he it was a difficult question to answer because they were playing this weekend. I think the likes of Lloyd Kelly, Phil Billen, Dom Solanke were put to him, which sort of touches upon. He was asked about sort of his involvement in transfers. I touched upon that, and it does sound like transfers at this football club are largely controlled by Eddie Howe, which maybe goes back to the Dan Ashworth argument. I went around in circles here with the Dan Ashworth stuff, but
it all links back.
But it does, yeah. Dan Ashworth maybe hasn't seen as much control at Newcastle as he would have liked of in terms of those transfers, because, as we understand it, Eddie Howe has sort of the final say. So, promises from Manchester United that he would go in there and have total control over transfers and more control over scouting, etc. All that kind of stuff. Maybe another factor as well as to why Dan Ashworth, as you said there, the term, it's a harsh term, but ultimately wants to jump ship to Old Trafford.
Yeah, and I think Eddie Howe can take some solace in the fact that Newcastle's best signings have probably predated Dan Ashworth in terms of Bruno, Kieran Trippier, Dan Burn. You could probably class all the work for players like Sven Botman, Nick Pope, and was there anyone else early on? Matt Target, I guess, were done prior to Dan Ashworth's arrival, even though the actual physical signings came afterwards. So, yeah, in terms of how many successful transfers Dan Ashworth has had a direct role in, there's not an awful lot, because obviously the jury remains very much out on the summer transfer window, and I think most people at this stage would say it's been a failure. So Eddie Howe and I think Newcastle as a whole can take some solace in the fact that, can they manage without Dan Ashworth? Yes, it wouldn't be a complete disaster. It's just more the timing of it going to a rival club and having that intelligence, as Eddie Howe put it, would be potentially damaging to Newcastle in terms of the summer transfer approach and the sort of long-term strategy moving forward, because as Dan Ashworth, as Eddie Howe said, it's a long-term role, and unfortunately it looks like Dan Ashworth has been in it relatively short-term. Yeah.
Right, I think that's it. I think we've touched upon all the key talking points.
Yeah, and I don't think we've been kicked out either,
so
that's a success.
I've been trying to do that, seeing if there's the door slammed open there, but no, we're safe anyway. Got a good 17 minutes out there, so that's good going. Okay, right, shall we wrap it up?
Yes.
Right, I'm going to try it.
Go.
Like, comment, share and subscribe for your latest Geordie Journos content. We'll be back tomorrow with Liam at St James's Park, where hopefully we'll be reviewing Newcastle United win.